Okay, we are live. I'm here today with Nia MooreWeathers, who works on youth issues in the city for Youth Forward. And we're going to get to her in just a minute. We had a very long city council meeting last night. We spent about 7.5 hours. The first 2 hours were something I look forward to every year. We have a program called Summer at City Hall, and that runs for 6 weeks during the summer. We had 55 young people who put together projects and did internships. Projects were about mental health and other needs that the city has, youth voting, really critical issues. And all of these young people presented to the city council yesterday, and it was just wonderful. I always say our measure of when we're successful is when we're no longer surprised at how smart and articulate these young people are. But we're just respectful of the work that they've done, and it was great. So we did that. We also spent a lot of time, the mayor, as many of you I'm sure know, is putting out a proposal around a strong mayor system of governance here in Sacramento. And we walked through that. The mayor spent some time outlining all of the pieces of the puzzle for him. And then we listened to public comment for a couple of hours. And then the council talked about it for a couple of hours. No decisions were made, no votes were taken, just a lot of input. And we'll come back next Tuesday to continue that discussion. So with that, again, I'm really excited today to have Nia here. We worked together on a few issues over time and found her to be incredibly articulate and just a great asset to this community. So Nia, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this position and what your organization does.
Of course, of course. Well, thank you, number one, for inviting me, Councilmember Schenirer. I appreciate it. I want to let everyone know I'm a Sacramento native. I want to start the conversation there. Was born and raised here, left briefly to go collect my degree at Humboldt State University, but I came back really kind of, looking around, looking for a job. My previous experiences in high school, I was at West Campus High School, got the opportunity to work with youth via mentorship programs, was always interested in social justice and advocacy. So upon returning back to Sacramento, I was interested in how I could get a little bit more involved with my community. And I, at that time, got put into contact with Jim Ketty, who is the executive director of Youth Forward, wonderful local nonprofit here in Sacramento that works mainly around youth-centered advocacy issues. So making sure that our youth are safe, making sure that they are healthy, and making sure that they have the resources to lead successful lives, especially when we're talking about school and when we're talking about public health standards around marijuana. That was one of the main focuses for Youth Forward. So I'm their community organizer. I spend a lot of my day trying to communicate with other individuals about how we can try and improve standards in our city. Just awesome to be here. Excited.
Great. Maybe tell us that's great, and we're excited you're here, and I'm glad you came back from Humboldt.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you have worked on through Youth Forward. So a better grasp of the situation.
Definitely. So one of the, like I just said, one of the main focuses at Youth Forward is that Prop 64 tax revenues. So at Youth Forward, we really focus on trying to understand the connection between the war on drugs and policy creation here in Sacramento around marijuana, right? We're concerned because we know that youth are it's not healthy for youth to smoke marijuana, right? Up until the age of 24, 25, 26, brains are not fully formed. We know that marijuana usage can impact that. So it's important for us to organize around that. A lot of our work was trying to create relationships with other community organizations across our state, creating a statewide network that serves to provide recommendations as to how Prop 64 tax revenues are spent. We do a lot of that grassroots organizing in collaboration with GoBiz. So that's one of our projects. We work very hard around that year long. Another part of our work, and that's in kind of connection to Prop 64, was organizing around expungements, marijuana-specific expungements. So trying to make sure that people who had gone to jail previously for marijuana were now getting the chance to come out of jail and return to their communities and return to their families. We did grassroots organizing with our public defender and our DA here in Sacramento, in addition to working with a national nonprofit known as Code Code for America. It's based out of San Francisco. And with that grassroots advocacy, we were able to clear somewhere around 6,000 marijuana-specific records here in Sacramento. So that was a really big win for us, one of our grassroots efforts. And obviously, we are a youth-serving organization, so one of our big focuses is youth funding. And the biggest kind of move that we've had around that was the Sacramento Kids First campaign and Measure G, so a permanent funding stream for youth. That was a year-long fight and a year-long effort. We connected with, my goodness, over, I want to say 90 different organizations here in the Sacramento area. We worked with a ton of different youth from North Sacramento, South Sacramento, the Oak Park area, a really incredible effort to gather nearly 50,000 signatures. So it was an incredible amount of incredible effort put together by those people. I learned quite a bit being able to participate in that campaign. It was my first campaign ever, you know, hitting the streets hard every weekend, going door to door. So it's very honest advocacy work. That's a lot of where we spent our time in Youth Forward. It's just trying to make sure that our youth serving organizations and our students have the proper resources that they need.
Right. And, you know, I was certainly supportive of Measure G. I'm sorry it lost. I think
Oh, yeah.
kids always get pushed to the back of the bus in a way.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a lobby, although organizations like yourself and the 89 others that you were working with are so important to have a voice at City Hall to really talk about what young people need to be successful in school and career and in life. So at this point, we don't have a Measure G. The mayor at the end of the campaign said, I have a youth initiative that was going to be on the ballot in November. We had, I know, discussions that I was involved with just because of the pandemic and the overall environment, and thinking that November wasn't the best time. But that you know, maybe you come back in 2022, which gives time to really reform and reformat the initiative that the mayor put forward with Measure G language and some other things that we have recommended as well. Everyone agreed to that. The City Council moved it. Now we have an opportunity, I think, that we didn't think we were going to have. Part of what the mayor's charter amendment will be is to take at least $40 million or $40 million of the general fund as a starting point to be adjusted every year. That would go for inclusive economic development. I raised the issue last night of within that inclusive economic development and youth, that the youth portion be necessarily be at least 25% of that 40 million. So about the same amount of money that Measure G would have proposed. So how would you as an organizer go about trying to make sure people understand and know that this is a possibility, that we could replace that potential Measure G money with a $10 million of general fund, that we could support our young people? What should we be doing or thinking about that? Or is there something else on the youth front we should be thinking about as we speak?
Well, I do think that that's a great opportunity. And in terms of trying to just support our youth, right? Like we kind of said at the top of this discussion, you know, youth are often kind of pushed to the back and often end up getting the scraps of whatever is left over. And as we all know, when youth are provided scraps, that doesn't necessarily work out for them. And so the opportunity to actually have a consistent funding stream and a funding stream that's actually large enough to support our youth in Sacramento is very exciting for me. That being said, we definitely, you know, in the effort of trying to organize around that money, we would want to start at the bottom and start with talking with our youth, right? I think that one of the problems that I run into and that I see as somebody doing community organizing, as someone working in youth leadership and youth development, is the anomaly of adult voices taking over the scene and adult voices taking up the space. In all of my meetings that I try and host with youth, I try and make sure that I emphasize their voices, that they are being provided opportunities where they can speak. And not only that, that they feel safe to share those opinions, right? So I think that if we were going to go about using that money, the first thing we would want to do is try and talk with our youth about how that money should be used. I think youth are extremely creative when it comes to coming up with new ideas, right? I think that's something that I've been noticing during the journey that we've all been on with COVID, right? And this global pandemic. Being able to get the opportunity to work in the Blunt Talk program that I run at a couple of different high schools, and getting a chance to talk with some of those youth and participating in some forms of distance learning. The things that I hear from my students are that there's a lack of variety of services and that there is a lack of avenues as to how to access those services. Not every single student is the same, so we can't expect distance learning to work for everyone. It's the same thing when we think about trying to decide how we spend these large sums of money. We need to be thinking creatively about how we can spend that money. We need to be consulting with our youth and trusting them and creating those safe spaces where they can share. I'd say that that's probably the most important thing that we could do and the best thing that we could do.
So, not asking you to replace their voices at all, but if you had $10 million a year to spend on ongoing money from listening and doing these focus groups with young people and listening to them, what do you think they would say is their number 1, 2, and 3 priorities of how to spend that?
Oh, youth mental health. I mean, I know we've had these conversations, and I know the city's having a larger conversation around youth mental health, but that's the number 1 thing I would say that youth are concerned about, that youth come to me to speak about, what I've been interviewing youth about, and the demands that I just hear in general, not only from our youth, but from their mentors, from their caregivers, and from their teachers, the people who associate with them. It all leads back to youth mental health, right? I think that if we spent that 10 million on youth mental health, we could spend less in other areas that have to do with our youth, right? I think another thing that youth are extremely concerned about is safety on their school campuses. I know that we've been seeing this across the nation, but there's a call for SROs and police officers to be removed from school campuses, not only because it doesn't allow students to necessarily feel safe when they're coming to school, but we also know the narrative of systemic racism in our country. And we know that when SROs and police officers are placed on school campuses, more students end up being criminalized, more students end up being fed into the school to prison pipeline. And we see larger community issues because of that one particular topic, right? Because of youth mental health. So I would say that if I had that $10 million and I could come up with a plan, I would be focused on how to improve mental health standards for youth in this city. And again, talking to them about how we do that.
Great. And from what we've heard in the surveys I've seen, it really gets down to peer-to-peer counseling and peer-to-peer mentoring with young people.
Yes.
We know if they want to call someone, they would prefer to call another young person to help them through a challenge that they may be having.
Yeah.
Good.
I'd also say too, if I could, I'd also add and say that doing a more formal style of therapy isn't also always what students want either. I've heard a lot of conversations about using recreational activities as a way to relieve stress, right? So thinking about drum circles, thinking about yoga, thinking about dance, thinking about spoken word, and other types of cultural activities to help relieve some of the mental health issues that might be going on.
So bringing the arts into the schools.
Yes, arts and music.
But arts for mental health for young people. No, that's
exactly.
Great. What else overall, just value your opinion on this, should this city be doing as we're trying to move forward? I mean, these are, the word unprecedented gets thrown around quite a bit, but these are unprecedented times. And what else could the city be doing to gain trust in the neighborhoods, I think is an important issue that we have.
Yeah, I hate to say this frankly, but do what the neighborhoods have asked, and what the neighborhoods have been asking the city to do for years. I think back to when I first began my job as a community organizer at Youth Forward and attending city council meetings during that time. And like now, a lot of those conversations were focused around inclusive economic development and what that actually means. And I think that during that time, the city did a okay job of coming into our more marginalized neighborhoods, right? And asking those specific questions, what can we do? The answers were given, and then it would appear that none of those things really happened. And I don't mean to say this to any discredit to all of the work that you guys do, because I know that you work very, very hard for our city. But people in South Sac are still struggling. They were promised a revamp. They did not receive. I also see some neighborhood strategies taking place up in northern Sacramento in the North Highlands area. And again, concerned about gentrification, concerned about citizens who have spent their whole lives here being pushed out of their neighborhoods. I think that that's something that the city could do a lot better, is actually listening to their citizens and moving on the specific items that their citizens have given them. I think that community listening sessions are a really great space for people to come forward and be able to say what they're feeling and say what they're experiencing. If people feel like they're being listened to, that trust is formed. And I think that's something the city could do to gain that trust back and to get that back. If people have said, I mean, I don't know, this is just an example, right? But we want 10 streetlights on this road because 5 children died on the crosswalk last year trying to get to school. Like, we should put 10 streetlights on that road. It's as simple as that. I think also thinking about equity, you know, when we're talking about inclusive economic development, our Black and brown neighborhoods have been ignored and disenfranchised for a very, very long time. And I believe that we should be giving them just as much attention. So I'd say that's what the city could do right now. And obviously, anything around police reform, which I know is a big topic issue, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think we're going at it. I think we're going at it in a thoughtful manner, and we need to push hard. Within the next 4 months or so, we should have a framework for how we want to move forward on that.
For sure.
I think those commitments have been made. Certainly, no one expected COVID, and I don't want to be defensive about it. We'd be in a very different situation had COVID not happened, but it did, and we're all dealing with it, and it's pushed a lot of things back.
For sure.
Which I do think we need to do better on. One of the things that actually some of my colleagues put together when we talked about part of the $89 million was each council district has $50,000. The federal guidelines are basically this has to be COVID related. Monies have to be spent and services provided at the end of the year. So I have in my council office $50,000 to do something with. We've been trying to solicit advice from people and people in the neighborhoods and communities. What should we do with that?
What should you do with the $50,000?
Yeah. How should we spend that? Either build community, maybe it's listening sessions. I'm very, very open to this and would love your advice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm thinking about your district specifically. I used to live in your district. That's District 6, Oak Park, and some parts of Curtis Park, correct?
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying that? Oh, so, 5. Oh, that's right. 5. Yeah.
No, Eric Era is 6.
I know.
I think about kind of the greatest needs. If you think about Oak Park and moving south from there, South City Farm, the Woodbine area, those are the areas of greatest need. Well,
experiences of living in that area when I was there, I just thinking off the top of my head, I can remember there are a lot of homeless people in that particular neighborhood. There are a lot of Black and brown people living in your neighborhood. There are a lot of working class and middle class people living in your neighborhood as well. So I think about the cross section of those identities and what those people could possibly need, right? I think obviously starting with a community listening session in a place like that would be great, right? It's a open and informal space where everyone can come and provide, again, their personal experience with what's going on in your district. And it gives them a chance as a constituent to connect with you, which again, I think goes back to that trust building. That's a great way to spend some of the $50,000. I don't know if—
And we're doing that, I assume?
Yeah, you do that on Zoom for sure. We are not doing anything in person right now because we do not want people to be exposing themselves to this virus. But a Zoom listening session or a Zoom town hall, I think, would be a wonderful start. If we can find a way to use some of that $50,000 to either support resources for some of the homeless people living in your area, whether that be connecting them with people who can put them into contact with services. I don't know if that looks like trying to find and or connect with affordable housing. I know that that's difficult to do. I don't know if that looks like hosting like nightly dinners in the park for people and actually putting direct services in front of people so they can take them. I think if I had that $50,000, I would try and do something like that with the money. Make sure that our houseless people and our houseless population is being taken care of as well. That's something that has been weighing heavy on my mind as somebody who lives in District 4. Lots of homeless people in Midtown, and thinking about not only their actual safety in terms of housing, but also thinking about safety with this virus, right? Our houseless people might not have the same resources to be clean and to be taking care of their bodies the same way that everybody else is during this quarantine. And when we're thinking about COVID numbers, and the lack of information that we still have around vaccines and treatment, this is an extremely important thing to try and make sure that we do. And I know that the city has already taken some measures to try and help our homeless population in terms of COVID at this point. So thank you for that. I'd say that those are my two number one things. And obviously, any sort of after school youth resources, anything that we can put together to keep youth occupied during this time, whether that's maybe contracting and hiring artists and musicians from our local area to teach classes on Zoom for our kids. Maybe we can find free coding classes and graphic design things online. These are some suggestions that I've been hearing from youth during this time, things that they would actually engage with versus perhaps a 6-hour-long Zoom distance learning a classroom where there's pressure to make sure that academics are getting to your teacher via this virtual space. Some students may not have the technological capability. Others may not learn that well in a group space online. So anything we could do with that $50,000 to make sure that youth have resources after school, that our homeless population is being helped, and making sure that we are minimizing the spread of COVID so we can all hopefully and eventually return to some normalcy. That's what I would do with that funding.
So we have a comment from Miguel Cordova who says,
"Oh, of course,
a forum that is focused on working essential workers with Spanish access and helping people who have not ever used Zoom. Got to find ways not to exclude folks." That's a great idea.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah, we got to make sure people have connectivity and devices, but if that's the case, then maybe we can do something there. Those are all great ideas. It's a tough one. If you want to do something meaningful, it has to be related to COVID. Otherwise, the federal government will take the money away from us and things like that.
Exactly. I hear you.
Challenge. I mean, the mental health stuff we're doing with COVID money or the CARES money all has to be done by December 31st. As I know, it's very difficult to build some systems, and then kids are not going to magically be fine on January.
That's true.
1st. So
it's a process.
Yeah,
it's a process.
I mean, the good thing I think is we're having discussions with Superintendent Dave Gordon from the county and Peter Beelens, County Office of Education, and Peter Beelens in the county. Everyone wants to do the right thing here, so hopefully we can get everything in place going forward. Cool.
Yeah.
So the last question that I have for you is the question that we ask everyone when we have them here. Is,
right.
If you were on the council and you had 4 other votes to do something, what would that look like? What would be the first thing that you would want to do?
Oh my goodness. To have the votes, to have the power.
Of course, you just are assuming because of the Brown Act, you don't know you have those 4 votes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. There are so many things to do, right? I think that just based personally off of my own experiences and the person that I am, I would have to make racial equity one of the very first things that I worked on if I had the power. A lot of the frustrations that I have as a particular citizen of the city frequently have to do with racial equity issues. And I think a big part of the reason why I get frustrated and why these things continue to happen is because we don't really have a good definition of what racial equity is within our city charter. And I think too that devising a specific racial equity toolkit, which could help us guide the way that we make budgeting decisions, policy creation, programming, and a whole host of other services. If we are emphasizing racial equity at every single point, I know that I would feel less concerned, and I know that a whole host of other people living in the city would feel less concerned. So if I had those votes, I would make the first thing that I do as a city council member to try and amend the Sacramento City Charter. I'm sure that would require a lot of conversations with my fellow city council members. I would need the support of community organizations and our business partners here in Sacramento to ensure that could be successful. And obviously, we'd have to talk to our community about what would go into that racial equity amendment, right? And what would go into that definition. But I think for me, that would be important.
What's the motion sound like?
What's the motion sound like?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I make a motion to amend the Sacramento City Charter for the entirety of Sacramento's existence. We haven't taken the proper guidance or the proper stance to ensuring that everyone who lives in the city receives a fair and just experience, not only with I'm not sounding good. This does not sound like a good amendment. Clearly, I would need somebody to write it for me. But if I'm doing it off the top of my head right now, but I'd probably start there. Something like that, Jay. I know that that's not helpful to you. But
well,
I would.
Send me the language, and we'll see what we can do. Okay.
Yeah, send me the language, and I'll come up with something.
So I just want to say thank you for coming on and spending a half an hour with me. I really appreciate it.
Definitely, and thank you for inviting me.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. We value the work that you do, particularly for young people. We got a lot of work ahead of us, and we'll just keep at it. And hopefully, we can all work together to make it the community we want.
Yeah, and I appreciate your partnership too. I know we get to work with you frequently, Mr. Schenirer, and I've always appreciated your guidance and your support and your help. You're always willing to listen, and for that, I'm super, super appreciative. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Have a good day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see everyone next week when we have Tamika Pine, who is our Active Transportation Commissioner for District 5. They're doing a lot of great things, and we'll hear from her about what the commission is doing and where we should be going on active transportation, particularly in those neighborhoods that need it most. All right. Have a good one, and take care. Stay healthy, everyone.
Bye-bye.